Photography, 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 photography. And now this week we get to talk about video. Hey everyone, it's Jordan Drake for DPReview, and I'm going to be talking about the new Olympus E-M1X, but for video shooters. If you're looking to know how it handles photography, check out Chris's previous video where he went into a lot of detail on it. There's tons of information here on DPReview as well for you to take a look at. But I actually shot our previous E-M1X video with this camera, so I want to talk about how that handled, as well as some tests I've run in the meantime. Now, the headline feature of this is we've got their Cinema 4K recording at only 24 frames per second. There's no option for Cinema 4K at 30, and also there's no 4K 60, which a lot of people were expecting, especially given that the sensor can do this and we've got dual processors. That is a real letdown. But shooting the Cinema 4K on it, I actually found the quality was quite nice on it, but there is a bit of weirdness. They advertise a 237 megabit per second record mode. I found the camera never hit that, even when we were shooting a scene filled with action. That means two things. First of all, it means if you've got a static scene that suddenly starts to get a lot of motion into it, you can get some weird motion compression artifacts. Although I have to say, this camera's way better than the E-M1 in that regard. Also bizarrely, however, when you're looking at your record time remaining on the camera, it's using that theoretical maximum data rate. So I shot an entire episode where it looked like I'd only been rolling for 10 minutes. The time remaining went from 32 minutes down to 22 minutes, but I'd captured 40 minutes of video. It's really disconcerting. Okay, so let's suppose that you don't want to record 4K, it's a little overkill, or you want to do some slow motion work. In a nice improvement over the E-M1 we now have 120 frame per second recording at 1080. Now you can see here, it's nice that they've given you the feature, but it is very soft, and to make up for that, looks very over sharpened even when you turn the sharpening right down in the camera. The E-M1 had kind of legendarily soft 1080 recording, and unfortunately, even though we've got all-eye compression as an option in this, I'm finding the same thing. I shot a comparison against the GH5, which has a very similar sensor, if not the same sensor in it, and you can see the 1080 coming out of that camera is still much sharper. It is a real disappointment. But let's say you want to go fast speed. You want to jump over and do some time lapse. I really love on this camera, we've got built-in time lapse functionality on it. Quality is great. It will build the video for you as well, which is a feature I love to see on these cameras. Weird thing is, we have USB-C charging, a feature that I love, and it charges the camera very quickly. However, it's not recommended to actually power the camera while it's shooting time-lapse sequences. My biggest disappointment with time-lapse came when they announced the live ND feature, which sounded perfect for time-lapse. I'm tired of forgetting my bag of ND filters during the day when I go out to record time-lapses. This would solve that, but unfortunately, I can't use the live ND in conjunction with the intervalometer on this. I know battery life might be a concern, but I don't understand it. It seems like a really weird artificial limitation, and I'd love it if firmware could fix that. Now, I really love Olympus's flat profile that they debuted with the E-M1 That's what Chris is filming me on right now. It's what I filmed our previous E-M1X review on. And it's a great, easy to work with profile, very simple to grade, but you do get some nice dynamic range with that. However, this is the debut of Olympus's OM log profile with the E-M1X. And a log profile will give you more flexibility in post and more dynamic range than standard picture profiles. We were kind of surprised, however, to discover that this is a fairly contrasty and quite saturated log image coming out of it. Now that makes perfect sense. This is an 8-bit camera, so you can't stretch those files as much as some of the 10-bit options out there, but it also means you're not getting access to as much dynamic range as we think this sensor is capable of. Comparing OM log to Panasonic GH5's 10-bit V-Log L, you can see that's a much flatter profile. You've got more dynamic range in the shot, and that makes sense. With 10-bit, there's more information to work with there. Now, Olympus's OM log is going to be getting a LUT at the end of February, which will make grading it a lot easier. However, if you're looking for maximum flexibility in post, I would look at a 10-bit camera like the GH5 or the Fuji X-T3. They're going to give you more to work with. Olympus is really best known for two things: excellent lenses and terrifying, daunting menu systems. And the E-M1X is no different, but they've given you the new My Menu to help you navigate it. Now, a lot of cameras have these now, but I think Olympus has the best implementation of anybody out there. You can just dial down to the menu option that you use on a regular basis, hit the record button, and it'll just drop it into one of your 5 My Menu options. Very elegant, very well laid out, and I can set up all the video settings I'm regularly going to use. Now I have to talk about my biggest irritation with this camera, and looking at the comments from our last video, it's yours as well, is that when the first battery is getting low and it's about to switch over to the second battery, it will give you the flashing battery warning, which is very stressful subconsciously and very aggravating when you know you've got a fully charged second battery it's about to jump over to. Easy to fix in firmware. Please, Olympus, fix this. I was really looking forward to testing out the E-M1X's video autofocus because the GH5 is an almost perfect micro four thirds video camera, but unfortunately the continuous autofocus still lets us down even after all the firmware updates. And I didn't know what to expect because the E-M1 II was not a great video autofocuser. However, the E-M1X is a huge improvement. Now, for starters, avoid the regular continuous autofocus. What works much better is use the CAF Plus tracking mode and tap your subject with the touchscreen. Unfortunately, you can't use the joystick to select your point, but once you do, it'll track very effectively. It's very sticky. Just make sure that you set your CAF sensitivity to +1. Otherwise, I find it's just too slow for any moving subjects, which is usually what you want autofocus for. The face detect also works really well, but unfortunately you really need to have the face largely fill the frame. So this is how close we needed Chris to get before it even detected his face. Once he does a really nice job following, very smooth transitions, but if your subject's further back in the frame, it will lose them. Overall though, I have to say this is a huge improvement, and this is the best autofocusing micro four thirds camera if you want to shoot video. Okay, so it's not totally me in my element, but I thought I'd give my hand a try at vlogging using the E-M1X. And largely that's because of the stabilization on this. Now, right now I'm shooting in stabilization mode 2, which is strictly optical, just using IBIS or lens-based if your lens supports it. However, I was finding I used this same setting when we shot our E-M1X review, and there was just a ton of weird wobble, digital-looking distortion in it. So what I've actually found a whole lot more effective is switching over to stabilization mode 1. Now, we do get a little bit of a crop once we jump into this mode, and it's using digital and electronic stabilization. However, you can see some of that background weirdness is much better controlled, and I don't want to have to fix it in post. So if you're doing a lot of movement, I would definitely stick to the mode 1. However, when I was trying to just do a straight locked off shot, I like the look of the optical in mode 2, so it does mean you're gonna have to play with the settings a little bit with this to get the most out of the stabilization. Okay, so the body on the E-M1X is huge, and it's pretty heavy, though I have to say it's certainly lighter than a 1DX2, which some crazy people seem willing to use for vlogging, but I really like the design on this body. For starters, we've got a fully articulating screen, and it's bright enough you can actually make it out when you're shooting in the sun like right now. But if you're plugging headphones into it, it will block a portion of your screen. You should be aware of that. However, my favorite new feature is something called C-Lock. It lets me lock any button or dial on the camera. I love this because I can lock my shutter speed dial once I start shooting, and that's a setting that I almost never want to change, and I find myself constantly accidentally changing on other cameras. Audio is something that I don't think enough camera companies are paying attention to, and it's really nice. In this, we have a better preamp than what we saw in the E-M1 II. Now, it's not the best one out there. I would still run a powered microphone, but right now I'm just using a little $35 powered Aperture ALAV, and it's doing a great job. Okay, so I've been nitpicking some of the annoyances with the E-M1X for a while here, so why did I decide to do a dedicated video about using the E-M1X for video? It's because of the stabilization. Now, I was disappointed when I first used it looking at that mode 2. Generally, I would just go to the optical stabilization, but mode 1 is giving me, bar none, the nicest looking stabilization I've ever seen from a camera. So if you can't set up a gimbal or you need to travel light, ironically with a camera this big, you are going to get amazing handheld footage out of this. It's very smooth, very natural. I love it. And we're getting some of those features that you want if you have to film yourself. We're getting a fully articulating screen, headphone jack, phase detect autofocus. This is kind of the holy grail of what people who've been filming themselves or vloggers have been asking for a long time. It just happens to be in a big, expensive camera. But if your production budget is high, I can totally see this being justified. I loved shooting with it. When we did the E-M1X episode, I felt very free to just walk around and film Chris, and I loved the result of that footage. Now, I hope you all enjoyed this. I would love to talk about more video features in standalone episodes in the future. If you like that, let me know. But thank you so much for watching. Don't forget, follow Chris and I on Twitter, follow us on Instagram, and we will see you all again in the next episode of DPReview TV.